The chandeliers of the Boston Harbor Grand Hotel glittered above me, throwing golden light across polished marble floors. My reflection distorted in the champagne flute I held. A woman in a modest black dress who didn't quite belong among the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The annual Harrington Financial Gala was the event of the year, but for someone like me, Madison Clark, executive, assistant extraordinaire and professional background character, it was just another evening of blending into the wallpaper. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," said Lauren Brooks, materializing beside me. My best friend and colleague had the enviable ability to look effortlessly chic in a secondhand dress. Her warm smile was the only genuine thing I'd seen all night. "Is it that? Obvious." I sipped my water, watching the corporate theater unfold. Board members loudly congratulated each other on another record year, while department heads jockeyed for position near the stage. Only to me, Lauren nudged my shoulder. "You're doing that thing where you try to physically shrink. Stand up straight. You earned your place here just as much as, the dynamic duo." Patrick. Hale's voice sliced through our conversation. My manager appeared, champagne in hand, his perfect smile not quite reaching his eyes. At 42, he was the youngest VP in the company's history, a fact he managed to weave into every conversation. "Patrick," I nodded politely. 3 years as his executive assistant had taught me to maintain a pleasant mask around him. The event coordination team did an amazing job, which you would know since you handled half their workload, Lauren muttered under her breath. Patrick ignored her comment. "Board's in great spirits tonight. Walter's about to announce the quarterly results. Record-breaking, thanks to our department." He straightened his already immaculate tie. "I put in a good word for you, Madison. Your hard work hasn't gone unnoticed." The same promise he'd been making for 3 years. I smiled thinly. "That's very kind." "Speaking of which," Lauren interjected, "when are those performance reviews happening? Madison's been asking for months." Patrick's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "All in due time. Some things need to go through proper channels. Politics, you know." He checked his watch. "I should mingle. The Stevensons just arrived." As he glided away, Lauren rolled her eyes. "He is so full of—" "Don't," I warned, though I couldn't help smiling. "Not here. Fine. But someday, Madison Clark, you're going to have to stop letting people like Patrick Hale walk all over you." I sighed. "It's called being professional. Besides, he controls my promotion path. And has dangled that carrot for how long now?" The truth, in her words, stung. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, covering for Patrick's strategic absences, fixing his mistakes without credit, all while struggling to make rent on my tiny apartment in Boston's South End, the one I shared with Lauren because neither of us could afford to live alone in the city. "Look," I said, straightening my shoulders, "the year-end bonuses are coming up. Patrick promised, or that." The room suddenly hushed. Walter Harrington, CEO and chairman of the board, had entered. At 74, Walter was a living legend in the financial world. Old Boston money combined with ruthless business acumen. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned, his silver hair and piercing blue eyes commanding instant respect. People parted before him like the Red Sea. I noticed several executives subtly adjusting their posture as he passed. Walter was known for his blunt assessments and eagle eye for detail, a man who could make or break careers with a single nod. I gripped my glass tighter, fighting the urge to actually shrink this time. In 3 years, I'd spoken directly to Walter exactly twice. Both times when Patrick had been mysteriously unavailable for crucial meetings. "He's coming this way," Lauren whispered, eyes wide. "What? No, he's—" I turned and found myself looking directly into Walter Harrington's piercing gaze. My words died in my throat. "Madison Clark," he said, his voice carrying easily despite its low timbre. Around us, conversations paused. People turned to watch. I could feel Patrick's attention from across the room. "Mr. Harrington?" I managed, wondering frantically if I'd done something wrong. His expression warmed unexpectedly. "I was just speaking with the Boston Children's Hospital Board. They were impressed with how you handled the charity coordination last month. You saved our partnership after that scheduling disaster." Heat flushed my cheeks. "I was just doing my job, sir." He studied me curiously. "How are you finding the new apartment? Comfortable? It's in Beacon Hill, isn't it? Good location." The world seemed to slow down. My mind raced to make sense of his words. "I'm sorry. What apartment?" Walter's expression shifted minutely. "The apartment. From your bonus package." When I didn't respond, he continued, "The executive housing allowance Patrick arranged. He said you'd selected a buy unit in one of our Beacon Hill properties. The room had gone completely silent now. I could hear my own heartbeat. I don't have an apartment in Beacon Hill, Mr. Harrington. I live in South End, with a roommate. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Walter's eyes narrowed, not at me, but at something over my shoulder. I turned to see Patrick approaching, his face ashen. There must be some confusion, Patrick said smoothly, though I noticed a faint tremor in his hands. Madison's paperwork is probably still processing through HR. Processing? Walter's voice had dropped to a dangerous quiet. You told the board 3 months ago that the housing allowances had been distributed. You showed us the documentation. Patrick's perfect facade cracked further. Yes, well, there were some delays. Walter's gaze hardened. If she never received it. His voice rose, each word sharp as a blade. Where is the money? The silence was deafening. Every eye in the ballroom fixed on us, on me, as the truth exploded into the open like a grenade. And in that moment, standing in my $89 dress from a department store sale rack, I realized my life was about to change forever. 6 months. Earlier, I'd been hunched over my desk at Harrington Financial, squinting at spreadsheets long after the office had emptied. Rain lashed against the windows of the 32nd floor, turning Boston's financial district into a blur of smeared lights. My eyes burned from staring at Patrick's expense reports, trying to reconcile figures that refused to align. You're still here? Lauren appeared in my doorway, coat already on. It's almost 9, Madison. Just finishing up, I said, rubbing my temples. Patrick needs these expense reconciliations for tomorrow's board meeting, and the numbers aren't making sense. She dropped her bag and peered over my shoulder. What's the problem? There's a $12,000 discrepancy in the quarterly executive housing allocation. I pointed at my screen. See this? Transfer to Boston Luxury Properties? It's coded under my department, but there's no corresponding paperwork, and it happens every quarter. Ask Patrick? I laughed hollowly. I did. He said it was above my pay grade and to just make it balance. Lauren frowned. That's not right. Welcome to my world. I saved the file and shut down my computer. I'll figure it out tomorrow. Let's go home. Before we miss the last train. Our apartment was a cramped 2-bedroom walk-up with perpetually temperamental heating and a shower that alternated between scalding and freezing without warning. That night, huddled under blankets in our living room while sharing leftover Chinese food, I confided my growing unease about Patrick. He's been acting strange, I told Lauren. Secretive phone calls, closing his office door when certain emails come in. And last week, he had me reschedule a meeting with Walter, then claimed he attended it. Maybe he's having an affair, Lauren suggested, twirling noodles on her fork. No, it's something else. I set my carton down. Remember when he forgot to submit my promotion paperwork? And then when the annual raises came around and mine was mysteriously lower than everyone else's? Lauren's expression darkened. And how he keeps taking credit for your work, like that presentation to the board that he couldn't have made because he was in meetings all week? Exactly. I pulled my knees to my chest. But what can I do? It's his word against mine, and he's a VP. Document everything, Lauren said firmly. Every strange request, every inconsistency, just in case. I nodded, but the weight of exhaustion pressed down on me. 3 years of just in case was wearing me thin. The next morning, Patrick called in sick for the board meeting. Walter Harrington personally called my extension. Ms. Clark, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. I understand Mr. Hale is indisposed. You'll need to present the quarterly financials in his place. My stomach dropped. Sir, I'm not sure I'm prepared to... Nonsense. You prepared the reports, didn't you? Yes, but then you're the most qualified person to explain them. Boardroom, 15 minutes. The line went dead before I could protest further. Presenting to Harrington Financial's board was like performing surgery while being watched by 12 critical surgeons. I managed to get through the main presentation smoothly. After all, I had prepared every slide, until Walter asked about executive housing allocations. There's a $250,000 increase from last year, he noted, tapping the report. Explain. I froze, thinking of those mysterious $12,000 quarterly transfers. The increase reflects additional property acquisitions and market adjustments, I said, carefully, repeating Patrick's vague explanation to me. Walter's piercing gaze held mine. And the occupancy report? I don't have those details with me, sir. Mr. Hale handles the final allocations. Something shifted in Walter's expression. Not anger, but a sudden attentiveness. I see. Prepare a detailed breakdown for me by tomorrow. Every property, every allocation, every recipient. That evening, I called Patrick in a panic. Walter wants a complete housing breakdown by tomorrow. I need access to your files on the executive housing program. Patrick's voice was tight. I'll handle it when I'm back. Tell Walter it'll be delayed. He specifically asked me. Madison, Patrick cut in sharply. This isn't your concern. I'll sort it out tomorrow. When he hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop. The responsible thing would be to wait for Patrick. The career-preserving thing would be to stay in my lane. Instead, I opened my work VPN and began searching. 3 hours later, I had found enough to make my hands shake. The executive housing program did exist, but the allocations didn't match the expenses. Several properties listed as occupied by staff appeared to be rented out at market rates, and my name appeared repeatedly in authorization forms I'd never seen, much less signed. Lauren found me still at the table at midnight, surrounded by printouts. What is all this? She asked, setting down her bag from her late shift. Evidence, I whispered, looking up at her with wide eyes. Patrick has been embezzling company funds for years, and he's been using my name to do it. Her face paled. Are you sure? I pointed to a document. This is a lease agreement for a Beacon Hill apartment supposedly allocated to me 3 months ago. Rent, $4,000 a month, paid by the company. But it's not empty. It's being subleased to someone paying $6,000 a month with the difference going to a shell company. Oh my God. Lauren sat down heavily. Madison, this is serious. This is criminal. I nodded, fear and anger warring within me. And there's more. That promotion I never got? The paperwork was approved, the raise I never received, also approved. Patrick has been intercepting everything. You need to tell Walter. With what proof? I gestured at the papers. I accessed these files without authorization. I could lose my job just for looking. Lauren's eyes flashed with determination. Then we need to find proof you're allowed to have. Something irrefutable. We stayed up until 3 a.m., forming a plan that terrified me but felt like my only option. Tomorrow, I would have to start playing Patrick's game, only better than he did. What I didn't know then was that the clock was already ticking down to that fateful night at the gala, when everything would explode in ways I could never have imagined. The morning after the gala, Harrington Financial's Boston headquarters buzzed with whispers. As I walked through the lobby, conversations hushed when I passed. In the elevator, people stared at their phones with unusual intensity, avoiding eye contact. Madison Clark? A security officer approached as I reached the executive floor. Mr. Harrington requests your presence in the main conference room. Immediately. My stomach nodded. Is this about last night? The officer's professional mask softened slightly. The entire executive team is already there. Lauren appeared at my elbow, her face tight with concern. I'll come with you. Ms. Brooks is also requested, the officer confirmed. The main conference room, normally reserved for board meetings and major client presentations, was a glass-walled space overlooking Boston Harbor. When we entered, 15 faces turned toward us. Walter Harrington sat at the head of the table, Patrick to his right, looking as if he'd aged a decade overnight. Ms. Clark, Ms. Brooks, please sit. Walter gestured to 2 empty chairs directly across from Patrick. As we settled, I noticed folders marked confidential placed before each executive. Let's get straight to the point, Walter said, his voice cutting through the tension. Last night revealed some concerning discrepancies regarding our executive compensation program. He opened his folder. Mr. Hale has provided an explanation I'd like to share with you, Ms. Clark. Patrick cleared his throat, his usual polished, demeanor notably absent. There's been a misunderstanding, he began, not quite meeting my eyes. Madison was indeed allocated an executive apartment 3 months ago. The paperwork was processed and approved. He slid a document across the table. Here's her signature. I looked down at a perfect forgery of my signature on a housing agreement I'd never seen. That's not my signature, I said, quietly. Patrick's laugh sounded strained. Madison, we discussed this. You signed it in my office after the quarterly review. You were excited about moving to Beacon Hill, remember? You even joked about finally having a bathroom without rusty pipes. A chill ran down my spine. The rusty pipes in my apartment were real, but I'd only ever mentioned them to Lauren. I never signed this, I repeated, more firmly. I never saw this document until now. And I certainly never moved into any Beacon Hill apartment. Patrick sighed dramatically. Walter, this is exactly what I warned you about. Madison has been struggling lately, missing deadlines, making filing errors. I've been covering for her, but that's a lie. Lauren interrupted, her voice sharp. Madison runs that entire department while you take 3-hour lunches and leave early for client meetings that don't exist. Patrick's face darkened. Ms. Brooks, your hostility is noted, but irrelevant to this discussion. You're not even in our department. Walter raised a hand, silencing the exchange, his penetrating blue eyes fixed on me. Ms. Clark, serious allegations have been made. Mr. Hale suggests you've been aware of your housing allocation, but have chosen, for reasons unknown, to continue your current living arrangement while potentially subleasing the company property for personal gain. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That's absurd. I live in a tiny apartment with Lauren because that's all I can afford on my salary. Your salary plus housing allowance would be more than adequate, Patrick interjected smoothly. What housing allowance? I demanded. I've never received any housing allowance. Walter studied me carefully. Ms. Clark, what was your last annual bonus amount? $4,500, sir. After taxes. Patrick shook his head. It was $45,000 plus the housing allocation. I have the disbursement records right here. My mind reeled. $45,000? That was 10 times what I'd received. I could feel the trap closing around me. Patrick had clearly been preparing this defense for months, maybe years. Lauren leaned forward. Mr. Harrington, I've lived with Madison for 3 years. She has never received these funds. She works 60-hour weeks and can barely make rent. Walter's expression remained unreadable. Financial records show the funds were transferred to accounts in Ms. Clark's name. Not my accounts, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I have 2 accounts, checking and a small savings. That's it. You're welcome to examine both. The transfers went to accounts at Boston Trust under your Social Security number, Patrick said, sliding another document forward. Opened 2 years ago. I stared at the paper, feeling sick. I don't have accounts at Boston Trust. This is fraud. Patrick sighed heavily. Walter, she's clearly trying to cover her tracks now that she's been caught. Next, she'll claim identity theft. Actually, a new voice interrupted. That's exactly what our preliminary investigation suggests. All heads turned toward the doorway, where a woman in a sharp suit stood holding a leather portfolio. I recognized her as Helen Reyes, head of Harrington's Internal Audit Division, and someone notorious for her methodical, merciless investigations. Ms. Reyes, Walter nodded. You have something to report? Following last night's incident, I took the liberty of pulling some records. She entered the room, standing at the foot of the table. The Boston Trust accounts were indeed opened with Ms. Clark's Social Security number, but the security questions and contact information don't match her personnel file. She turned to me. Ms. Clark, have you ever owned a boat named Strategic Advantage? What? No. Or attended Northwestern University? I went to UMass Boston. Helen nodded, then looked directly at Patrick. Interesting, since those are the security verification answers on the account. Also interesting that the account's primary contact email is a variation of Mr. Hale's personal address, patrick.hale.strategic@gmail.com, rather than his company email. The room went utterly silent. Patrick's face drained of color. That's circumstantial, he finally managed. Madison could have used my email as a backup. The IP addresses used to access these accounts trace back to your home network, Mr. Hale. Never to Ms. Clark's residence or our office. Walter's expression hardened. Ms. Reyes, please continue your investigation. I want a full forensic audit of all executive compensation packages for the past 5 years. He turned to me. Ms. Clark, I owe you an apology for these accusations. It appears you've been the victim of a sophisticated fraud. Patrick stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I've given 13 years to this company. Madison is clearly working with internal audit to frame me because she's bitter about— Sit down. Walter's command cut through Patrick's protest like a knife. Your access to all company systems has been temporarily suspended pending investigation. Security will escort you to clean out your personal belongings. Supervised. As Patrick was led away, his face, contorted with rage, he hissed at me. You'll regret this. No one will believe you over me. But looking around the table, I could see the truth dawning in the executive's eyes. The perfect, polished Patrick Hale was crumbling before them, while I, the invisible assistant, suddenly stood in sharp focus. The meeting adjourned with Walter requesting I remain available for further questions. as Lauren, and I walked back to our department in stunned silence. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This isn't over. I've got more friends than you think. Watch your back. I showed Lauren, my hand trembling. Forward it to security, she said immediately. This is harassment. I nodded, but the damage was done. The threat lingered in my mind as we reached our floor, where curious eyes followed our every move. For 3 years, I had been invisible. Now, I was at the center of what would become the biggest scandal in Harrington Financial's history. And somehow, I knew this was only the beginning. For the next 2 weeks, Harrington Financial became a hive of quiet chaos. Helen Reyes's audit team commandeered a conference room, requisitioning files and interviewing staff. I was called in 3 separate times, each session more detailed than the last, combing through years of documents I'd handled for Patrick. Did you ever question these expense reports? Helen asked during our second interview, pushing a stack of travel receipts toward me. Several times, I admitted. But Patrick always had an explanation. The Boston client meeting that required a weekend stay at, the Four Seasons, the emergency first-class upgrade because he needed to work during the flight. Helen made a note. And this Paris trip labeled as European Investor Relations? He said it was confidential. When I asked which investors he was meeting, he said that information was above my clearance level. Ms. Clark, Harrington Financial has no European investors. We've never had, European operations. The revelations kept coming. By the third interview, Helen's tone had shifted from interrogative to almost apologetic. We've found at least 16 instances where your electronic signature was used without authorization, she told me. The housing allowance was just the tip of the iceberg. How did he get my signature? I asked. The employee handbook you signed when you were hired. He simply extracted it and created a digital stamp. She hesitated. There's something else. Your performance reviews, the ones in your HR file, don't match the ones you signed. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? The reviews you received rated you as meeting expectations with occasional needs improvement notes. But the originals you signed, which we found on the backup server, rated you as exceeding expectations with recommendations for promotion. The injustice of it burned in my chest. 3 years of questioning my own worth, wondering why I wasn't good enough, all while Patrick systematically ensured I would stay small, underpaid, and dependent on him. Meanwhile, Patrick had vanished. After being escorted from the building, he'd emptied his personal bank accounts and disappeared. Rumors circulated that he'd fled to Canada or Mexico. Security had been heightened, and Walter had assigned me a temporary office away from the executive floor. For privacy, he'd said. But we all knew it was to avoid the stares and whispers. On a rainy Tuesday 3 weeks after the gala, Walter called me to his office. Ms. Clark, he greeted me, rising from behind his imposing desk. Please sit. His office, unlike Patrick's flashy space filled with expensive art and awards, was understated in its elegance. The only personal items were a single family photo and a worn baseball signed by Ted Williams. The audit is complete, Walter said, coming straight to the point. The findings are disturbing. He slid a document across his desk. The executive summary detailed a systematic fraud totaling over $1.2 million over 4 years. Patrick had created a paper kingdom of fake allocations, diverted bonuses, and phantom expenses, many in my name. He stole from you most directly, Walter continued. Approximately $230,000 in bonuses, raises, and benefits that were approved but never reached you. The amount staggered me. It was more money than I'd earned in my entire working life. There's also the matter of opportunities stolen, Walter added, his voice gentler now. Promotions you were recommended for, training programs you should have attended. Ms. Reyes found emails where Mr. Hale specifically blocked your advancement. I struggled to find words. Why would he do this to me specifically? Control, Walter said simply. You were competent enough to make him look good, but he kept you financially vulnerable and professionally stunted so you wouldn't outgrow your position or question his methods too closely. The assessment was so accurate it hurt. I had stayed because I needed the job, because each year Patrick promised things would improve, because starting over somewhere else seemed too daunting. The board has approved a compensation package to make amends, Walter continued. Back pay with interest for everything that was diverted, and the Beacon Hill apartment is yours if you want it. Properly documented this time. I blinked back unexpected tears. Thank you, sir. There's something else. Walter leaned forward. Patrick's position needs to be filled. Temporarily, at least. I'd like you to step in. The offer shocked me. Sir, I'm not qualified. You've been doing half his job for years, Walter interrupted. The other half was criminal activity we'd prefer not to continue. His rare smile appeared. 3 months interim. If it works out, we make it permanent. If not, you'll have your choice of positions at your new pay grade. As I left Walter's office, my mind spinning with possibilities I'd never dared. Imagine, Lauren was waiting by the elevator. Well, she demanded. What did he say? I told her about the compensation, the apartment, the interim position. With each revelation, her eyes grew wider. Madison, she breathed when I finished. This is incredible. You deserve every bit of it. It doesn't feel real, I admitted as we walked toward the cafeteria. Part of me is waiting for Patrick to jump out and say it was all a test of my loyalty or something. Lauren's expression darkened. That manipulative bastard better never show his face again. But Patrick Hale wasn't finished with me yet. That evening, as Lauren and I were packing my belongings for the move to Beacon Hill, my phone rang with an unknown number. Madison Clark, I answered. You think you've won? Patrick's voice, slightly slurred but unmistakable. You think you can just take my life? Ice flooded my veins. Patrick, where are you? Wouldn't you like to know? He laughed bitterly. Enjoying my apartment? My job? You planned this all along, didn't you? You and that bitch Lauren. You stole from me for years, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You forged my signature. You blocked my promotions. I made you, he shouted. You were nothing when you started. A community college graduate with a cheap suit and no connections. I gave you a chance. UMass Boston is a state university, not a community college. I corrected him calmly. And you didn't give me anything. You took. For years. His breathing was heavy on the line. This isn't over, Madison. People like you don't win against people like me. Remember that. The call ended abruptly. Lauren, who had been listening wide-eyed, immediately took my phone. I'm calling security right now, she said. And the police. As she dialed, I sank onto my bed, the full weight of Patrick's threat settling over me. The fairy tale ending Walter had offered suddenly seemed fragile, threatened by a man who had nothing left to lose. What I didn't know then was that Patrick had already set in motion his final, desperate attempt to destroy me, and that the worst was yet to come. The Beacon Hill apartment was everything I'd never let myself dream of owning. Hardwood floors gleamed under recessed lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed views of Boston Common. The kitchen featured marble countertops and professional-grade appliances I had no idea how to use. Standing in the spacious living room that first night, surrounded by my few belongings that looked almost comically out of place in such luxury, I felt like an imposter. I can't believe this is yours, Lauren breathed, running her hand along the granite kitchen island. I mean, it was supposed to be yours all along, but still. It doesn't feel real, I admitted, opening cabinet doors, to find them all empty. Like I'm house-sitting for someone who will return any minute to reclaim their life. Lauren squeezed my shoulder. This is your life now, Madison. The one you earned and deserved all along. My phone chimed with a text message. It was Helen Reyes. Security alert. Patrick accessed his email remotely before we could shut it down completely. Used his executive override. Call me ASAP. Cold dread washed over me. He's up to something. Within an hour, we discovered what. Patrick had sent emails to every member of the executive team and board of directors from his company account. A desperate, last-ditch attempt to salvage his reputation by destroying mine. The email, which Helen forwarded to me, was a masterpiece of manipulation. Walter, I'm deeply concerned about, Madison Clark's mental stability. She's been obsessed with my position for years. Fabricated evidence against me, romantic fixation, increasingly erratic behavior. Consider psychological evaluation before giving her access to sensitive information. This is insane, I whispered as Lauren read over my shoulder. No one will believe this. Some already don't, Helen confirmed on the phone. But Patrick built relationships with these people for 13 years. You've been largely invisible. Some are questioning. The next morning, I walked into Harrington Financial for my first day as interim VP with my head high and stomach in knots. The stairs followed me to the elevator, through the executive floor, to Patrick's former office. Now mine. Walter was waiting inside. Ms. Clark, he said, rising from one of the visitor chairs. Getting settled? Just arrived, sir. I set my single box of personal items on the massive desk, Patrick's desk, with its pretentious green leather blotter and antique pen set still in place. Walter's sharp eyes missed nothing. We'll get you new furniture. Make this space your own. Thank you. I hesitated, then decided to address the elephant in the room. I assume you received Patrick's email? I did. Walter's expression hardened, as did the entire board. Desperate tactics from a desperate man. Will it cause problems? For him, perhaps. Unauthorized access of company systems after termination violates at least 3 laws. Walter straightened his tie. As for the content, opinions are divided. Those who've worked directly with you dismiss it entirely. Others, he paused. Let's just say you have something to prove. I nodded slowly. I understand. Good. Now, your first challenge. He handed me a folder. The Ackerman acquisition. Patrick was leading it, but the documentation is a mess. Board presentation is Friday. After Walter left, I opened the folder to find a chaotic jumble of financial statements, valuation models, and due diligence reports, all in various states of completion. Typical Patrick. Impressive top-line numbers, disastrous details. I'd have to rebuild it from scratch in 3 days. For the next 72 hours, I barely left the office. Lauren brought me changes of clothes. The cleaning staff found me asleep at my desk at 4 a.m. By Friday morning, I had reconstructed the entire acquisition proposal, identified 3 major risks Patrick had conveniently omitted, and created contingency plans for each. Walking into the boardroom, I felt the weight of every executive's assessment. Some nodded encouragingly. Others watched with cold skepticism. The Patrick loyalists, no doubt. Ms. Clark. Walter gestured for me to begin. The floor is yours. For the next 40 minutes, I walked the board through the Ackerman acquisition, fielding questions with a confidence that surprised even me. When I highlighted the hidden risks and my proposed mitigations, I saw several executives exchange impressed glances. This level of detail is refreshing, remarked Diane Winters, CFO and one of Patrick's closest allies on the board. Where did you find the pension? Liability issue? That wasn't in the original due diligence. I cross-referenced their SEC filings with the actuarial reports. I explained. The discrepancy wasn't obvious unless you compared specific footnotes. Diane nodded slowly. Very thorough. By the end of the presentation, the energy in the room had shifted. The acquisition was approved unanimously, with my risk mitigation strategies adopted in full. As the board members filed out, Walter remained seated, watching me gather my materials. Well done, he said simply. Thank you, sir. The pension liability could have cost us millions if undetected. I nodded, packing my laptop. Patrick often focused on the headline numbers and ignored the details. So, I'm learning. Walter stood. You've taken your first step toward erasing his legacy. Keep going. Over the next few weeks, I did exactly that. Each day brought new challenges. Restructuring Patrick's chaotic department, rebuilding client relationships he'd neglected, cleaning up financial models riddled with hidden assumptions and mathematical errors. Slowly, the skeptics began to come around. Meetings that had started with suspicious glances ended with grudging respect. My inbox filled with questions that would have gone to Patrick before, now directed to me with an expectation of actual answers. Lauren visited my office regularly, always bringing coffee and a reality check. You need to go home sometimes, she admonished one evening, finding me still working at 8 p.m. The beautiful apartment you never see? Remember that place? I rubbed my tired eyes. No. But there's so much to fix. Madison. Her voice softened. You don't have to prove yourself by working yourself to death. That's what Patrick would expect. The comparison stung because it contained truth. Was I trying to prove my worth through endless labor? Wasn't that exactly the trap Patrick had set for me for years? You're right, I admitted. Let me finish this one report, and I'll head home. Promise. 2 hours later, I was still at my desk when my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Enjoying playing executive? Check your email. The board will love this. My heart raced as I opened my email to find a message from anonymous@protonmail.com sent to me, Walter, and the entire board. The subject line, Madison Clark, the truth. The attached document was a detailed dossier with screenshots of what appeared to be my personal banking records, showing large cash deposits coinciding with dates of Patrick's known embezzlement. Next were photos, clearly photoshopped, of me entering expensive hotels with Patrick. The final page contained a fabricated email exchange between Patrick and me, discussing how to divert company funds. My hands shook as I dialed Walter's number. I've seen it, he said before I could speak. Crude forgeries, but damaging if anyone believes them. Walter, none of this is real. I know that. His voice was calm. The question is, can you prove it? As I hung up, my phone chimed again. Like I said, not over. I'll burn everything down before I let you win. In that moment, I realized Patrick wasn't just fighting to restore his reputation. He was waging psychological warfare. He couldn't stand that I had survived his abuse, that I was thriving in the role he thought I didn't deserve, and he was just getting started. By Monday morning, Patrick's evidence had circulated throughout Harrington Financial despite IT's attempts to block the email. Whispers followed me through the office. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Someone had printed the doctored photos and taped them to my office door overnight. Security removed them before I arrived, but not before others had seen. This is harassment, Lauren fumed, pacing my office. He should be in jail, not playing mind games from whatever hole he's hiding in. I stared out the window at Boston's skyline, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. The police say they can't locate him. The emails are routed through anonymous servers. And the board? What do they say? Officially, they're standing by me while the IT department analyzes the documents. I turned to face her. Unofficially, there's doubt. Patrick built relationships with these people for years. I'm still the newcomer. But the evidence is clearly fake. Is it? I picked up the, folder containing printouts of the forged banking records. These account numbers are real. They're from my actual checking account. The transaction dates align perfectly with dates Patrick was withdrawing company funds. He's done his homework. Lauren frowned. How did he get your account numbers? The question had been haunting me all weekend. I don't know. Maybe when I submitted my direct deposit information? Or from company expense reports? A knock at my door interrupted us. Helen Reyes entered, her expression grim. Madison, we need to talk, she said, closing the door behind her. I'd finished their preliminary analysis of Patrick's evidence. The banking screenshots appear manipulated, but expertly so. The photos are obvious fakes. But the emails, she hesitated, they're problematic. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I never wrote those emails. The headers look authentic. They came from your company account on dates you were definitely working. Patrick must have had access to your credentials. That's impossible. I never shared my password. Helen sat down heavily. You wouldn't need to. As your supervisor, Patrick could request a password reset from IT. Under emergency protocols, it would have generated a temporary login he could use. The violation hit me like a physical blow. For years, he could have been reading my emails, sending messages in my name, accessing everything. What does this mean for the investigation? Lauren asked. It complicates things, Helen admitted. Some board members are questioning whether Patrick acted alone. Walter's trying to keep everyone focused on the forensic evidence, but she spread her hands. Politics. After Helen left, I sat in silence, processing the implications. Everything I'd worked for these past weeks, the respect, the position, the vindication, suddenly felt precarious. What are you thinking? Lauren asked quietly. I'm thinking Patrick is smarter than we gave him credit for, I replied. He built an exit strategy, insurance in case he ever got caught. What are you going to do? I straightened my shoulders. Stop playing defense. It's time to go on the offensive. That afternoon, I requested access to the complete server archives of Patrick's emails, not just his official account, but any company communications stored on the backup servers. Walter approved it personally, overriding IT's initial reluctance. For the next 3 nights, Lauren and I combed through thousands of emails looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that might reveal Patrick's true nature to those still defending him. On the 4th night, at 2 a.m., we found it. Madison, look at this, Lauren said, her voice tense with excitement. She turned her laptop toward me. Email from Patrick to James Westfield at Boston Trust Bank dated 2 years ago. I scanned the message, my heart racing. James, accounts are established as discussed. Using the documentation provided for M. Clark. We'll initiate first transfers this quarter. Standard arrangement applies. 12% management fee to our agreed offshore account. Keep this strictly between us as always. P. This is it. I breathed. Proof he was setting up fraudulent accounts in my name. Lauren was already scrolling through more emails. There's an entire thread. Westfield was his contact at the bank. They've been working together for years. By dawn, we had compiled a comprehensive dossier, not just on Patrick's embezzlement using my identity, but similar schemes involving 3 other employees over the past decade. The pattern was clear. Patrick would target dedicated workers in junior positions, use their identities to create financial instruments, then siphon company funds while ensuring they remained too financially insecure to question him. At 7 a.m., I walked into Walter's office unannounced, placing our findings on his desk. "This isn't just about me," I said as he skimmed the documents, his expression darkening. "Patrick has been doing this for years, and he had help." Walter looked up sharply. "James Westfield. I know him. He manages our corporate accounts at Boston Trust." "Not anymore, he doesn't. He was fired 6 months ago for irregularities." That's when Patrick started getting nervous. His accomplice was gone. Walter reached for his phone. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting. 1 hour." The boardroom was tense as I presented our findings. Some executives looked shocked, others vindicated. Diane Winters, once Patrick's staunchest defender, appeared physically ill as she reviewed the evidence of his systematic fraud. "These other employees," she asked quietly, "have they been notified?" "Not yet," I replied. "I thought that should be the board's decision." Walter nodded. "We'll need to, make restitution just as we did with Madison, and there will be criminal charges." "Against Patrick?" asked another board member. "Against Patrick, against Westfield, and against anyone else involved," Walter confirmed. "The FBI has been notified. This crosses state lines and involves banking fraud." As the meeting concluded, Diane approached me. "I owe you an apology, Madison. I believed Patrick when he said you were unstable." I met her gaze steadily. He was very convincing. That's how he operated, making others question their own judgment while he stole right in front of them. Walking back to my office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The truth was out, not just my truth, but the full extent of Patrick's deception. The system that had protected him was crumbling, and those he had, manipulated were finally seeing clearly. My phone buzzed with a text. "This isn't over," it read, now a familiar refrain, but this time I smiled as I typed my response. "Yes, Patrick, it is." The FBI arrived at Harrington Financial on a Tuesday morning, bringing with them the cold efficiency of federal investigation. Special Agent Marilyn Chen led the team, setting up a command center in our largest conference room where boxes of financial records quickly accumulated. "Ms. Clark," Agent Chen greeted me, her handshake firm and direct. "Your documentation has been extremely helpful. We've been tracking similar schemes at 3 other financial institutions." "Patrick worked at other firms before Harrington," I noted. "Yes, and left each one just ahead of internal investigations." She consulted her tablet. "We believe Mr. Hale has been operating this same fraud for nearly 15 years. The scale was staggering. What had happened to me wasn't personal. It was Patrick's business model." "Have you located him?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for weeks. "Not yet, but we've frozen the accounts we know about." Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. "Ms. Clark, I should warn you. Men like Patrick Hale don't surrender quietly. As we close in, he may become more desperate." Her warning proved prophetic. That evening, returning to my Beacon Hill apartment, I found the door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, I backed away, calling security and then Lauren. The police arrived within minutes, sweeping my apartment with practiced efficiency. Nothing appeared stolen, but something far more disturbing had occurred. Someone had gone through my belongings, rearranging photos, opening drawers, leaving subtle signs they had invaded my most private space. Intimidation tactic, the detective concluded, taking photos of the scene. "No forced entry, so they had a key. We'll change your locks immediately." Lauren arrived as the police were finishing, her face tight, with worry. "You're staying with me tonight. No arguments." Back in her apartment, my former home, I sat at the familiar kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold. "He wants me to feel unsafe," I said quietly. "To know he can reach me anywhere." Lauren's eyes flashed with anger. "He won't win. The FBI will find him." But as days turned into weeks with no sign of Patrick, my vigilance began to take its toll. I jumped at unexpected sounds, checked my rearview mirror constantly, questioned every unusual email. The psychological warfare was working. I was living in a state of constant alert. Walter noticed the change. "You're losing focus," he observed bluntly during our weekly meeting. "Patrick is winning if he's in your head like this." "I know," I admitted. "But until they find him, then let's find him ourselves." Walter's eyes narrowed with determination. "I've known Patrick for 13 years. I hired him. If anyone can predict his movements, it's me." That afternoon, Walter assembled a small team. Himself, Me, Lauren, Helen Reyes, and surprisingly, Diane Winters. Patrick and I were close, Diane explained, seeing my questioning look. He confided in me. Things that might help now. We gathered in a small conference room away from the main office, creating what Walter called a psychological profile of Patrick Hale. Where would he go? Who would shelter him? What resources might he still have access to? He always talked about a sailing retirement, Diane recalled. A boat in the Caribbean, St. Thomas specifically. Helen made a note. That matches the strategic advantage reference from the bank security questions. His mother lives in Vermont, Walter added. They're estranged, but she owns a remote cabin near Burlington. Piece by piece, we assembled a map of Patrick's possible hideouts. The FBI had already checked obvious locations, but our insights provided new avenues to explore. Agent Chen added them to her investigation, appreciative of our insider knowledge. 3 days later, my phone rang at midnight. We have him, Agent Chen said without preamble. Patrick Hale was arrested an hour ago, attempting to board a private charter to St. Martin from a small airfield outside Burlington. He had $175,000 in cash and a fake passport. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down. Is it really over? The investigation continues, but yes, he's in federal custody. No bail given the flight risk. She paused. There's something else. He had a notebook with extensive plans regarding you. Surveillance notes, building access codes, even your daily routines. A chill ran down my spine. He was planning something. It appears so, but he won't get the chance now. I called Lauren first, then Walter. By morning, the news had spread throughout Harrington Financial. Patrick's arrest made the financial pages, with the Wall Street Journal running a front-page story on the executive assistant who exposed a corporate fraud ring. The spotlight was uncomfortable but validating. For years, I'd been invisible. Now my name was associated not with scandal, but with integrity and courage. 2 weeks later, Walter called me into his office. The interim period for my position was ending, and despite the successful resolution of the Patrick situation, I still felt uncertainty about my future. Madison, Walter began, unusually using my first name. The board met yesterday to discuss the VP position. I nodded, steeling myself. I understand if you want to conduct a proper search. My appointment was unorthodox. Walter studied me for a moment. The board voted unanimously to make your position permanent, with a substantial compensation adjustment. He slid a document across the desk, an employment contract with a salary figure that made my eyes widen. This is very generous, I managed. It's market rate for the value you bring. Walter leaned forward. Madison, in 40 years of business, I've learned to recognize exceptional talent. Sometimes it's loud and obvious, like Patrick pretended to be. But the most valuable kind is often quiet, diligent, and honorable, like you've proven to be. As I signed the contract, a weight lifted that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying, not just from the weeks of Patrick's harassment, but from years of doubting my own worth, of believing I somehow deserved less than others. That evening, I hosted a small celebration in my Beacon Hill apartment. Lauren brought champagne. Helen and Diane came with flowers. Walter made a brief appearance, raising a toast that ended with, "To Madison Clark," proof that integrity still matters in finance. After everyone left, Lauren helped me clean up, both of us slightly giddy from champagne and vindication. "You know what I can't stop thinking about?" she said, collapsing onto my couch. "That moment at the gala when everything changed, when Walter asked about the apartment and your face just gave everything away," I finished, smiling at the memory that had once been painful. I was never good at hiding the truth. Thank God for that. She raised her glass in a final toast. To bad liars and good friends. As we clinked glasses, my phone chimed with a news alert. Former Harrington VP Patrick Hale pleads guilty in fraud case. Faces 15 years. The final chapter of Patrick's hold over me was closing. And for the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt truly free. 1 year after the gala that changed everything, I stood at the same spot in the Boston Harbor Grand Hotel ballroom, watching a new generation of Harrington Financial employees mingle beneath the glittering chandeliers. This time, wearing a designer dress I'd chosen myself, I wasn't hiding in the shadows but standing confidently as Vice President of Corporate Strategy. "Quite a difference from last year," Walter remarked, appearing beside me with a glass of whiskey in hand. "In more ways than I can count." I agreed. The past year had been transformative. Patrick's case had concluded with a 14-year prison sentence after he accepted a plea deal to avoid additional charges. James Westfield, his accomplice at Boston Trust, received 8 years. The FBI had uncovered similar schemes at Patrick's previous employers, with over a dozen victims identified. Hardworking employees who, like me, had been systematically exploited and gaslighted. Harrington Financial had weathered the scandal remarkably well under Walter's leadership. Our transparency about the fraud and commitment to making victims whole had actually strengthened client trust. The Madison Clark whistleblower policy now protected employees who reported financial irregularities, and our compliance department had been completely restructured. My own department had flourished. I'd assembled a team of brilliant analysts who shared my attention to detail and commitment to integrity. Together, we'd restructured Harrington's investment strategy, focusing on sustainable growth rather than Patrick's philosophy of flashy, high-risk ventures. Your team's performance this quarter was exceptional, Walter noted. The board was particularly impressed with the Henderson acquisition analysis. I smiled, thinking of the all-nighters my team had pulled to complete that project. They deserved the bonus you approved. Every one of them. Speaking of which, Walter nodded toward the entrance where Lauren was arriving. No longer my roommate, but still my closest friend, she now headed Harrington's newly expanded internal audit division, a promotion she'd earned through her own merit and determination. Lauren spotted us and made her way over, elegant in a deep blue gown. Madison Clark? Actually enjoying a company function? I never thought I'd see the day. I'm full of surprises, I laughed. That you are. Walter raised his glass. 2 surprises. After Walter moved on to greet other executives, Lauren linked her arm through mine. You know, sometimes I still can't believe how everything turned out. Me neither. I gazed around the ballroom at faces that now showed respect rather than dismissal when they met my eyes. I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's been a mistake. That's just the ghost of Patrick talking, Lauren said firmly. You earned every bit of this. She was right, though therapy had helped me process the trauma of Patrick's manipulation and harassment. I still occasionally battled the whisper of imposter syndrome he'd so carefully cultivated in me. My phone buzzed with a text from Helen Reyes. Heads up. Boston Globe running a feature on corporate fraud tomorrow. You're quoted extensively, all positive. Another unexpected aspect of the past year had been the media. Attention. Financial journals, business schools, and even mainstream news had become interested in my story. I'd initially resisted the spotlight, but Walter had encouraged me to use it constructively. Your experience can help others, he'd advised, particularly young women in finance who face similar situations. He'd been right. The speaking engagements and interviews I'd reluctantly agreed to had connected me with others who'd experienced workplace gaslighting and financial abuse. Their stories had helped me understand that what happened wasn't my fault, and that by speaking out, I could help change a culture that enabled predators like Patrick. As the evening progressed, I found myself approached by a young woman from the analyst program, bright-eyed, slightly nervous, clutching her eye. Champagne flute too tightly. Miss Clark, I'm Emma Dawson. I just wanted to say, your story is why I applied to Harrington, and your mentorship program has been life-changing. The mentorship initiative had been my first major proposal as VP, a structured program pairing promising junior staff with senior leaders, ensuring that talent wouldn't be overlooked or suppressed as mine had been. I'm glad to hear it, Emma. How are you finding your rotation in fixed income? Her eyes widened in surprise that I knew her placement. Challenging, but in a good way. My mentor, Ms. Winters, is demanding but fair. I smiled at the mention of Diane, who had become one of my strongest allies after Patrick's downfall. She'll push you to be your best. That's a gift, even when it doesn't feel like one. Later, as the gala wound down, Walter took the stage for his annual address. After reviewing the company's performance and future outlook, he paused, his gaze finding me in the crowd. I want to close with a reflection on leadership, he said. True leadership isn't about who speaks the loudest or claims the most credit. It's about integrity, perseverance, and the courage to stand for truth even when standing alone. He raised his glass. Harrington Financial is stronger today because we learned this lesson the hard way. Here's to those who lead by example, not ego. The applause that followed felt like the final closing of a circle that had begun with humiliation in this very room a year before. As guests began departing, I stepped onto the hotel's terrace overlooking Boston Harbor. The city lights reflected on the dark water, beautiful and serene. Lauren joined me, wrapping her cardigan tightly against the evening breeze. Penny for your thoughts? She asked. I was just thinking about something my grandmother used to say. The truth has a way of burning through lies. Lauren nodded. She was a wise woman, She also said that dignity can't be taken, only surrendered. I turned to face my friend. Thank you for not letting me surrender mine, for believing me when I barely believed myself. Always. Lauren squeezed my hand. So what's next for Madison Clark, corporate rising star? I laughed at the description. Honestly, I'm thinking about writing a book about financial abuse, workplace gaslighting, how to recognize the warning signs. You should. It could help so many people. We fell silent, watching a boat glide across the harbor, its lights creating a path through the darkness. You know what's strange? I said finally. For years I thought success meant being seen, getting recognition, promotions, status. But what I really needed was to see myself clearly, to recognize my own worth, independent of what Patrick or anyone else said about me. And now? Now I know that being visible isn't the same as being valued, and I'd rather be valued for who I truly am than seen for who someone else wants me to be. As we turned to leave, I took one last look at the ballroom where my journey had begun. The space that had once witnessed my greatest humiliation now held a different memory, one of vindication, growth, and hard-won wisdom. The light inside had changed, or perhaps I had. Either way, I stepped forward into the night, no longer invisible, no longer afraid, carrying the quiet certainty of a woman who had reclaimed not just her professional standing, but something far more precious, her truth. We can't control when others try to dim our light, I said softly, remembering the words I'd written in my journal the night Patrick was arrested. But the truth has a way of burning through lies, and when it does, dignity shines brighter than any stolen reward.